Okay, simple summary for this week is going to be a little different and a little shorter because I want to make a point about the evolution of the presidency. It's not really going to be a personal story per se, although Theodore Roosevelt is a character in that story. Have I ever sipped coffee during one of these before? Well, I'm going to now. The reason I want to do this a little differently is I only want to make one central point for you to grasp. And it's for you to think about, it's for you to decide. It may sound like I'm criticizing current presidents and politicians or even recent presidents and politicians. I'm not exactly, because that's not history, right? That's current events. But I wonder about things that happened during the time that Theodore Roosevelt was president that people understood at the time and felt and believed were positive. And maybe they were for 1904, but for 2004 or 2024 or 2025, maybe they're not so good anymore. So here's the thing. Here's the story. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the framers debated what the presidency should be, and people were not sure. There was not a lot of agreement. Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, in case you're wondering, thought that the person should serve for life. People on the other side of the aisle thought the president should be weak, and they were worried about a strong president because, after all, they had just fought a revolution to throw off the rule of a king. And so this debate continued until they came up with the office of president. When Washington first came in, there were suggestions that he be referred to as His Excellency, and there was all kinds of other crazy things. Keep in mind, he probably could have been king if he wanted to be. So Washington preferred a simplicity, the simple title, Mr. President. And his own personal, I don't want to say he was modest because he was actually quite vain, but he carried himself with a certain quiet dignity, set a tone, right? He left office after 2 terms when he could have stayed there the rest of his life. He set an example there. And the people who came after him, there were some very able people, but there were also some pretty ordinary dudes who were just there. I don't think Millard Fillmore is an exceptional president. He was president. What did he do? Not much. And so over the course of the 19th century, generally, presidents were not activists. They didn't necessarily lead except in times of crisis. Some of them did. Jackson did. Lincoln did. But, of course, Lincoln had a war. He had to. A lot of presidents were just kind of there. And the power in Washington is going to shift. It's going to go somewhere. If you don't use it, somebody else is. And so for a lot of the late 19th century, the power was in Congress, and the president was just kind of, chill, involved, but not the center of everything. When Theodore Roosevelt became president in 1901, he changed that. Because, again, I understand that 42 to you is 1,000,000 years old, right? And that's depressing because I'm 52, but it is what it is. In terms of presidents, and I'm not just talking about because of Biden's age or Trump's age, 42 is extremely young. That is actually the youngest president ever. And that's what Theodore Roosevelt was. He was younger than Kennedy. He was younger than Obama. He was younger than Clinton. He was 42. And he was a force of nature. He was a hurricane, and he could not be repressed. And so he acted differently. He was 42 years old. He wasn't old in this context. And he was a very bold, brash personality. And so because of who he was, he changed what the presidency is. If you look at the White House, the building itself, there's a mansion, and then there's an East Wing, and then there's, in 1900, nothing else. If you've ever heard the phrase the West Wing, or if you're familiar with the TV show, that's where the Oval Office is. That's where the president's staff is. And that's maybe the best signal here of that there's a change, which is Theodore Roosevelt built the West Wing of the White House because when he got in, when he became president, the government, the executive branch, the presidency, was going to be too busy to for him to just have an office in the upstairs of the White House the way Lincoln did in the mansion. They built a whole new section of the White House complex called the West Wing, with offices for not just an Oval Office for the president, but offices for everybody, and hired more people and changed that. Because it's not just a president. He's got to have a staff. He's got to have any number. The number changes, but it can be in the thousands of people that a president can now appoint. That kind of activist, and I don't mean activist in terms of left or right. I'm talking about activist in terms of doing something or doing nothing, active or passive, okay? That was Theodore Roosevelt. And by the way, it's not an accident that he followed Lincoln's model. Now, he didn't have a civil war, but Lincoln wasn't. Lincoln moved. Lincoln did things, and Roosevelt did things. He wasn't there to be Rutherford B. Hayes and just be in the White House and serve, punch at the White House ball and whatever. He wanted to get things done. So here's the dilemma that I want you to think about. Roosevelt did that, and it worked for him. And subsequent presidents went back and forth. Some of them were kind of chill. Harding was pretty chill, for instance, didn't do much. Fathered a child with somebody who wasn't his wife, so maybe he wasn't that chill. But in terms of policy, didn't get a lot done. Later presidents went back and forth. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, Theodore's cousin, very activist, very busy. Kennedy wanted to be busy. Nixon wanted to be busy. A little earlier, Eisenhower was content to take a nap for 8 years. And don't get me wrong, I love General Eisenhower, but that's a philosophy of government that differs from the people who came around him. We did not live in a television age when Theodore Roosevelt was president. People read newspapers. People sat down and read long articles in newspapers. That's not how people get their news anymore. I don't know how they do exactly, because people don't really watch the evening news on television. People listen to podcasts. People watch clips on YouTube. There's a lot of different ways. It's very different even from when I was younger. People don't really buy newspapers anymore, and even digital subscriptions to them are rare. And the reason that matters is people are paying less and less attention to politics and to government and what's going on. And I think you could argue that is objectively a bad thing, that the country does better when its people are paying attention to what its government is doing. But that's not the culture we live in now. We hire a president every 4 years, and we fight like hell about who it's going to be, and then that's our guy, or that's their guy, and we like our guy, and we hate their guy, and that flips both ways. I'm not talking about either one. But when your guy is in office, you expect him to solve all your problems, and his job is to promise everything in the world that he's going to do and give you stuff, right? If you're a Democrat, I'll use Biden as an example. Okay, we're gonna repeal this Trump policy, and we're gonna expand healthcare, and we're gonna put these people on the Supreme Court to protect abortion rights, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, whatever. Okay, because that's what the people on that side want, and they're just basically expecting the president to give them what they want. Republican comes in, current president, could be any Republican, it's going to be different list of things, right? I'm going to close the border, and we're going to lower prices, and we're going to do this, whatever. The point is, the president is elected to give you stuff now, or to do things for you in a personal way, and you support or oppose the president because of what they're going to do. And that, unfortunately, dates back to Theodore Roosevelt, who changed what the presidency was and changed what people expected from it. It worked for him. I'm not sure it works anymore. And I'm not blaming Theodore Roosevelt for the fact that we have a political climate now where The other side is bad, right? If you're a Republican, the Democrats are evil communists, and if you're a Democrat, then the Republicans are fascist Nazis, and everybody's Hitler, and all just foolishness, right? Reality lies somewhere in between. I think that people still lie somewhere in between, regardless of which side they happen to vote for in a given election. I'm not talking about the partisan differences. What I'm saying is you can draw a dotted line from Theodore Roosevelt in 1901 all the way to now, because he changed what we expect from a president. He raised the level of what we expect and what we think we're going to get out of it. It could be individual, it could be as a country, but when you raise possibilities of we can do this, you raise hopes. And over a period of time, those hopes harden into expectations. And I'm not certain, and I want you to think about this, and I want you to write your response, if it's a good thing or not. One last example. I went longer than I wanted. It's 11 minutes already. Theodore Roosevelt in 1904, 05, I'm not sure, 05, helped end a war between Russia and Japan. And he won prizes for that, and accolades and praise, and justly so. Good for you. You ended a war. But when he ended that war, he elevated the power of the Japanese in the Pacific. And I am not going to blame Theodore Roosevelt for Pearl Harbor when Theodore Roosevelt died in 1919, and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't until 1941. But in settling that war, which was a good thing that he did, just like I think it was a good thing that he made the presidency something that where people could think, well, this is my leader. There's another dotted line there, which is elevating Japanese power in the Pacific 35 years later. Maybe not such a good thing when they're bombing our ships and killing our soldiers and sailors. Not Roosevelt's fault, but you start something that makes sense in 1905, and maybe by 1941 it doesn't make any sense. You start something that makes sense in 1903 in terms of how the presidency is operated, and maybe it's great for the American people in 1903. Is it great for the people now? I'm not sure. Tell me what you think. That's what the response we'll hear will be about. Write the summary, but the questions are going to be basically your answers, your opinions, which can't be wrong. I don't have an answer. I suspect it's not great for us now, but I also have no idea what to do about it. Okay, that's simple summary for this week.